Today we're going to be talking about preaching Proverbs and wisdom literature. Proverbs and Ecclesiastes are great books in the Bible. There's much wisdom there. But a wise pastor will know that he needs to be careful when preaching them, that he can't simply preach them strung together. They can be difficult, and they have certain pitfalls.
When we're talking about preaching Proverbs, we're primarily talking about two books in the Bible. The main one is the book of Proverbs, of course, but the other one is the book of Ecclesiastes, which has long sections of Proverbs in it also. Both of these books are considered wisdom literature. Now, what is a proverb? A proverb is a wise, short statement. It's similar to what we call today a sound bite. It is a short, pithy statement that includes some piece of wisdom that we can carry away. In a pre-literate society, proverbs were one of the main ways that people were able to carry wisdom with them wherever they went. By memorizing proverbs, they had a guide to go in whatever situation of life they may find themselves in. Now, there are three problems when we start to preach wisdom literature, and particularly Proverbs, that need to be addressed. The first of those problems is that Proverbs are often circumstantially and not universally applied. Let me illustrate what I mean by that. Let's take these two Proverbs. One of them, too many cooks spoil the broth. Now, I realize that's not a statement from the Bible, but it is a common proverb. On the other hand, the abundance of counselors, there is wisdom. Now, in one of those Proverbs, it tells us that we shouldn't have too many people doing anything. On the other one, it says, the more people that you can get to help you, the better off you are. Which one is true, and which one is false? Well, the truth is that both of them are true. It depends on the circumstances and the situation which one is true. Or let's say, for example, birds of a feather flock together, telling us that people who are alike each other tend to stay together. On the other hand, opposites attract. Which one is true? Both are true. It depends on the circumstances. And this has to do with what wisdom is. Wisdom is the application of knowledge in real-life situations. And wisdom is not the memorizing of rules and regulations for life, but the ability to be able to take moral principles and apply them broadly across all circumstances in life. In order to do that, sometimes we have to have a balance. Proverbs often have to counterbalance each other. For example, take the teaching of hard work. Oftentimes we find in the book of Proverbs it teaches us that we need to work hard, and it warns us against sloth. It says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard." So it tells us to work hard. But on the other hand, the Bible also teaches us to keep the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a balance to hard work. If we only taught hard work and we didn't teach the Sabbath, we would have an unbalanced life. Or if we only taught the Sabbath without diligence, we would also have an unbalanced life. So Proverbs are sometimes circumstantial because they provide a counterbalance to help us keep on an even keel. The second problem with Proverbs is that the book of Proverbs is really a disorganized book as far as we can tell. The Proverbs seem to be put in randomly. Now that causes a problem for preachers, and especially preachers who like to preach an entire chapter at a time, or preachers who preach through books. It's difficult to preach through the book of Proverbs because each chapter may contain 40 or 50 different main ideas and messages. So which one do you preach? Well, there are ways of dealing with that, and the best way I know to do it is to preach Proverbs topically. Instead of preaching Proverbs verse by verse, one verse to another, or chapter by chapter, it might be a place to consider gathering the Proverbs together that speak about one issue. For example, what it says about the tongue, and teach what the Proverbs say about the tongue, or what the Proverbs say about marriage, or what they say about wisdom. These could be series of sermons on these particular subjects. But if you try to cover all of what Proverbs says about marriage or the tongue in one sermon, it might be quite a bit. So rather than trying to organize by simply preaching linearly the chapters or the verses, it might be a good idea to look and see what the topics are And the last problem I want to address about preaching Proverbs isn't really the book of Proverbs, but the book of Ecclesiastes, which is also a book which contains Proverbs. Ecclesiastes is a book that has perplexed many writers and many people, and many have questioned, why is it in the Bible? When you look at some of the statements that are in Ecclesiastes, you can understand why they ask that. Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. The dead know nothing. Study is a weariness to the flesh. How do you teach people to study and show yourself approved when you're telling them that it's a weariness to the flesh? The fate of the fool will overtake me also, and so what do I gain from being wise? How do we square that with some of the statements in Proverbs about the importance of gaining wisdom? Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. You can see these are very dark statements and very serious statements. So how do we preach Ecclesiastes, and how do we understand it in the broader context of the Old Testament? So how do we interpret Ecclesiastes in lieu of some of the dark statements that it makes? Well, the first thing that we need to remember about it is this. Ecclesiastes ends with God. Ultimately, God's glory is what Ecclesiastes is all about, and it is the answer to the darkness of life. Look at the last verses of Ecclesiastes. Now all has been heard, and here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. As you can see, the God-fearing life is what Ecclesiastes is really all about. And the dark painting that it gives us about the rest of life is for the purpose of helping us to understand that this life is not our ultimate end, that we need more than that. Now, what it is saying is this, that the futility is with this life, not with the next. Walking with God is not futile, but walking without him is. And so Ecclesiastes is warning us to make sure that God is in the center of everything we do. Remember this too. We must be disillusioned with this world to grasp the next. As long as we think that this is a pretty good world, and as long as we think we can obtain the values of life in this world that will make it worthwhile, we'll never really understand what it means to fear God. Ecclesiastes tears down the wise, tears down the rich, tears down the self-confidence in this life, so that we may grasp God confidence that will carry us on into the next life.